March 1945 did not feel like the end of a war. It felt like something unfinished, dragging itself forward out of habit. Snow mixed with ash along the roads, and the ground swallowed boots as if it wanted to keep everyone where they stood. The sniper had learned long ago not to name herself in moments like these. Names made things real. Numbers were safer. A rifle, a position, a silhouette where a man would be in a few seconds. She did not think about faces anymore. Thinking slowed the hand. The explosion came from the left, close enough to lift her off the ground without killing her. When she landed, the world had narrowed to ringing ears and gray smoke. Someone shouted in German. Hands grabbed her shoulders, her arms, her rifle. She reached for her sidearm and found nothing. The moment passed. No last shot, no defiance, just a sack over her head and stone steps under her boots. The smell was the first thing she noticed when the sack was pulled away. Damp earth, mold, old incense. A church basement. The irony was not lost on her, but irony was a luxury she no longer indulged. The officer waiting there did not raise his voice. He did not strike her. He introduced himself politely, in careful Russian, and said her name as if it were an ordinary fact, like the weather. That was how it began, not with pain, but with recognition. He knew where she was born. He knew when she volunteered. He knew the unit she had trained with, the ones who had not survived long enough to be photographed. He laid papers on a wooden table and turned them slowly, letting her see stamps and signatures. Proof that distance did not protect anyone forever. There were others in the basement, 2 Soviet soldiers captured during the retreat, bruised and hollow-eyed. A German deserter, barely older than a boy, shaking even when no one touched him. A woman from a nearby village, accused of passing bread to partisans. They were arranged like pieces on a board, close enough that she could hear their breathing in the dark. The officer explained the rules gently. He asked questions that had no correct answers. If she spoke, one of them would be taken away. If she stayed silent, a different one would go. Sometimes he followed through. Sometimes he didn't. It was impossible to tell which choices mattered and which were illusions. By the end of the first day, she understood that this was not interrogation. It was education. Sleep came in fragments, interrupted by footsteps and whispers. Hunger sharpened her thoughts and dulled them at the same time. On the second day, the officer brought a rifle, not hers. He placed it in her hands and adjusted her grip as if she were a student again, fresh from training, before the numbers had started to add up. He told her that one of the prisoners was a traitor. He said that if she shot him, the others would be released. The rifle was heavy. There was no scope. The distance was wrong, too close, intimate in a way no battlefield had ever been. She looked at the faces in front of her and saw not enemies, not comrades, but witnesses. She knew it was a lie. She also knew that refusing would not save anyone. The explosion echoed strangely in the low ceiling. After it, the world did not end. The officer nodded once, as if confirming a hypothesis. Something inside her went quiet, and she knew it would never speak the same way again. On the third day, he stopped pretending. He spoke of what would come after the war, of tribunals and amnesties, of how paperwork could erase a man more thoroughly than death. He said that peace would be uneven and that memory would be selective. Then he gave her a list, 20 names, officers, translators, auxiliaries, men who had learned how to survive between systems. He told her he was letting her live on purpose, not out of mercy, but because she would remember, because she would understand what to do with the knowledge. He smiled without warmth and said that wars needed people like her even after they were officially over. Artillery collapsed the church that afternoon. Stone cracked, and dust filled the basement. In the chaos, she found a way out that no one had bothered to guard. No one freed her. No one congratulated her. She walked until her legs stopped shaking, and then walked some more. Victory came weeks later, announced by radios and shouted by men who still had the strength to shout. Her name appeared on a list of the fallen, misspelled. She did not correct it. The thought of returning home felt abstract, like remembering a story someone else had told her once. Instead, she moved west, following rumors and faces, carrying the list folded into the lining of her coat. Post-war Germany was quieter than the front, but not calmer. Ruins had their own language. People learned to look past one another, to rebuild walls without asking who had broken them. She learned new names for herself and forgot them just as quickly. She listened in taverns and watched hands instead of faces. Hands betrayed habits. Hands remembered. The first name took weeks. He lived outside a city that no longer had a center, working in a warehouse, laughing too loudly at jokes that weren't funny. When she saw him close up, she felt nothing dramatic, no surge of rage, only a sense of continuity, as if she were completing a sentence interrupted long ago. Afterward, she slept for 12 hours and dreamed of the basement. Others followed. Some resisted, some begged. Some recognized her without knowing why. With each name crossed out, the list grew lighter and heavier at once. Intelligence services whispered about a pattern, a ghost. Files circulated with her description, always slightly wrong. She heard about it once and smiled despite herself. There were moments when she wondered what would happen when the list ended, whether the silence afterward would be bearable, whether the line she had crossed could ever be retraced. She had stopped asking whether she had the rights. Rights belonged to peacetime. She was operating in what came before. The last name was the hardest to find. He had learned early how to disappear, how to let others take blame. When she finally stood across from him, there was no speech, no explanation, just recognition, mutual and complete. When it was over, she stood for a long time, listening to the ordinary sounds of a city learning how to live again. After that, she did not know where to go. The war had taken her future and given her a task in its place. Now the task was done. She walked until the roads became smaller and the ruins gave way to fields. Somewhere people were rebuilding families, telling stories with clear beginnings and ends. She did not envy them. She did not resent them either. She understood finally that the war had not killed her humanity all at once. It had worn it down, piece by piece, until what remained was something harder, narrower, and capable of carrying unbearable weight. Whether that could ever soften again, she did not know. She stopped at the edge of a town she had never heard of and watched children play among stones that once held walls. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to stand still without listening for footsteps. The silence was not peaceful, but it was honest. History would not remember her. That, too, was an ending.